Right back.
Well, I will go ahead and start this meeting now. Bob will be back in a second, of course, but we'll get this going so that we can at least chat here. And Greg, you can give us some input, and that'll be fantastic. I'm going to just do the Economic Development Committee informational meeting update here. Due to the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis, and in accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-4, this committee is authorized to meet electronically. Please note there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the Governor's Emergency Order. If you cannot access the meeting, please call 603-436-7640 for assistance. The Newington Economic Development Committee will be happy to listen to Gregg Mikolaities today. And let's see here, we're open. This is open to anyone in town or anyone, I suppose, anywhere by the web, but also we'll hopefully have some other board members and other local citizens listening in to find out more about the possible upsides and downsides of mixed use development in Newington. Last week we had a presentation from Christian Stallkamp from the Blueless Companies, and he was talking about mixed use from the perspective of a broker in the business, commercial real estate broker. Today, we're honored to have Gregg Mikolaities, who has been a fixture with a lot of engineering and site survey work through his whole career. Most recently, he actually had his office, I think it was in Newington, but maybe it was Portsmouth technically, but it was over at Pease. So we've gotten Gregg to come in today and to talk about it from just the perspective of the overall world he sees in the real estate community. So Gregg, I'm going to turn it over to you. And if you could just give us a little background on yourself and then jump into how you see mixed use being most reasonably implemented that would be of interest to our viewers out there.
Okay. Good afternoon, Gregg Mikolaities. My current firm is August Consulting. I've been a consultant since 1982. Used to have a company for 23 years, Appledore Engineering, that I sold, probably almost 10 years ago at this point. So now I provide consulting services to developers, tenants, landlords, landowners, and by being in this industry for close to 40 years, I'm actually going back now working on projects, redeveloping projects that I permitted back in the 80s and 90s, which is really interesting. So my background, just to put it in context, from 1985 to 2005, I did over 200 shopping centers throughout New England. That's retail was booming. Everybody was moving to New England. We worked for every retailer there was, from the big boxes to the small Applebee's, and those 200 shopping centers were supermarket anchored shopping centers. So I can say, hi Jerry, how are you? I can say in the last half a dozen years, we are not doing any really ground up, 100% ground up. It's more looking at those shopping centers I did from the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s and kind of repurposing them. And it's interesting. One example is here in Portsmouth. Sorry about my dog. One example is here in Portsmouth is the Southgate Shopping Center they call Portsmouth Green. They tore down some of the retail and put a 94 unit apartment building there. That's a project I permitted back in the 80s. I mean, it was already there. It was probably in 1950s, 60s, but we did a facelift in the 80s and they just did a facelift recently. So I guess my observations, to put it in a nutshell, is, obviously retail's changing. I'm doing actually thinking out loud here, another project over in Londonderry, a shopping center that I permitted in the 90s. that we're actually looking to put a distribution center, distribution building, not a center, but out behind it. There's a lot of excess land, and we're just in the process of starting those plans. But it's a very desirable. You figure all these shopping centers, right? They're all location. So they're very desirable for repurposing. And I don't know what Christian told you last week, but I'm working on a number of projects with Christian also, looking at, repurposing, some of these centers. So anyway, in the towns, Stratham, Northampton, I've actually had this discussion with the EDCs in both Stratham and Northampton. Everybody's looking at retail and repurpose, and everybody's trying to figure out what's the next step and what's the next 10, 20 years are going to look like. So I've had the same discussion with a couple of other towns. I know I went into the Newington Planning Board probably over a year ago at this point. Just kind of gave them some observations. Dover's done a good job with their mixed use. They got that, the Point project out on Dover Point Road. I'm up in Rochester now. We're looking at some potential rezoning up there to allow, residential in the commercial zone. So there's a number of things happening on all fronts. So your discussion in Newington is timely because everybody else is looking at it too. So that's all I have, Jeff. I don't know, I was just going to open up the questions and dialogue, quite frankly.
Well, I'll throw out a couple of questions. What do you see, Greg, as the most relevant way to set these up so that it doesn't create a huge negative burden on the town? What have you seen working to?
Yeah, so what we're doing in some of these mixed use, some of the discussions we're having is making it almost like an accessory use or a complementary use. So it's not predominantly. So, what the fear is all of a sudden you're going to turn a commercial industrial zone into a residential zone. That's not the purpose. It's more make it complementary. It has to be, 30% of the density or 20% of the density, or, have it fit in. And, we're even talking with one town now of, you can't even see it from the street, to kind of have it out back behind the commercial zone so it doesn't, ruin that. So, we're talking about that. We're also talking about, and it's not just residential. I mean, a lot of these centers now are primed for distribution, warehouse and distribution, kind of this new e-commerce model that, I think is going to change in the next 10 years, where we're going to start seeing, you can go touch something. It's like, well, actually Newington had it. I said this to somebody one day, because we were talking about this distribution model. You used to go to Sears, order something at Sears and go down to Gosling Road in the warehouse. The Sears warehouse used to be there for all the big stuff, and used to, put in your car there, but you'd go into the Sears store at the Newington Mall, pick out your lawnmower you wanted, and they'd send you down to Gosling Road to pick it up in the warehouse. So it's interesting. So that model's already been around for the last 20 or 30 years that I remember.
A lot of that they call, I think, experiential, slightly modified definitions here, but experiential retail.
Right.
What have you seen with that around and about?
It's more and more. I'm actually, I would tell you for the last 4 or 5 years, it's been apartments. That's all I would say in the last 6 months, I'm amazed at how much distribution, warehouse and distribution. So that I can see the tide turning. I mean, I saw a study yesterday. There's still 20,000 homes short in New Hampshire or some crazy number. So I don't think residential is going to slow down anytime soon. I was shocked. The last time I saw a number was 10,000. Then yesterday, somebody quoted 20,000 housing units short in the state. I'm like, wow. And then also, we're repurposing some of these big boxes into smaller boxes, carving them up. That's going on. Medical office, we weren't doing hotels, quite frankly. We were doing hotels on some of these commercial sites up until COVID hit a couple of years ago. But we were looking at, hospitality in some of these centers. So I'm seeing a little bit of everything, Jeff. I mean, I don't think anybody, read a lot and I do a lot of research, and I don't think anybody's crystal ball is very clear what, what the future of retail is. I do know when you talk to developers that have these big retail holdings, they all know they have to do something different. They don't quite know what that is, but they're concerned what the world's going to look like, or what their portfolio is going to look like 4 or 5 years from now. And there's a lot of cases of mall redevelopment all over the country. So I would say the concern about residential is make it somehow a complementary use, where it's a percentage of 20%, 30%, some smaller percentage, so it doesn't overwhelm. But it will create some synergy. If you talk to the developers of Southgate Plaza, which is Portsmouth Green, they're saying that those 94 units have changed the dynamics of that whole shopping center. That was an old, tired shopping center that's been there for, I can't remember. It's been as long as I can remember. But that's probably a 50s, 60s shopping center. And it's interesting. Obviously now they got a movie theater that's not doing, that's closed for the winter. So that's not helping. And
well, they got bowl and
yeah, that's not helping. And then, the bowling alley, they just opened recently. I don't know how they're doing over there in that, but that was all pre-COVID when that was planned. It was, nobody saw this coming, that's for sure.
Well, I know, are you familiar at all with down in Linfield Marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, that's been a whole dynamic situation there. That's
a whole self-contained village down there. They've done a really good job. In fact, I have a client, I can't disclose it now, but got a fairly large piece of property, and he's looking to do something just like that. We just started. We had a kickoff meeting a couple of weeks ago. That it's not in Newington, so don't worry. It's not in Newington, but that's kind of the model that he's looking at. And quite frankly, he would build the apartments first and the retail kind of streetscape later, anticipating that retail is going to come back to some degree, that it would be a good complementary mixed use. I'm working with another project now with a developer that, again, wants to put some apartments in a commercial zone. And, in fact, I just got the traffic studies I'm talking to you. I haven't read it yet, but talking to the traffic engineer, substantially less traffic generated from residential, especially when it's complementary and going to sit there as opposed to just straight commercial. So, and then what I'm trying to find out, and I don't have any good information yet, I can't get a traffic engineer to commit, is what's the work at home dynamic? Everybody knows that, it's less traffic, less travels, but there's no formal studies that these guys are aware of that are adopted where you can say, okay, 20% reduction, 30% reduction. No one's gone out on that limb yet, but they think that's going to be still 2 or 3 years away. But this whole work at home COVID thing is clearly changing the traffic generation dynamics.
That makes sense. What is your experience? And I know you're not on the, let's say the broker side, the valuation per se side, but if you were to go from, let's say, what we've had in the past with all of this retail, and it would have been at one point considered Class A mall. Now, if you're going from, let's say, a Class A mall use to repurpose to distribution, like you're saying, as a hot commodity, what does the valuation look like once you're into a commercial? Once you're into a distribution center? What do the rents look like? Is that something you have any?
I don't know specific numbers. In fact, I had this discussion with a couple brokers a couple weeks ago, because I can't believe the money that people are paying to buy some of these old shopping centers and tearing them down or repurposing them for distribution. So I don't know what the dollar value is, but it doesn't pass my common sense test. That's why I called a couple brokers a couple weeks ago. I'm like, are these guys for real? I mean, it's different properties, predominant properties around the state here that it looks like they're going to be repurposed, and money's no object, it seems, for some of these warehouse distribution guys.
Oh, all right. But you don't have any idea of what?
No, I don't. No, I don't. The short answer is no.
We were hearing from Christian, he thought you know, if you were at 16, 17 bucks a foot for rent for retail, you know, that going into distribution, if it was just a clean, hey, we're going to start to reuse it as distribution, then the rent might drop to $6 or $8 per. And if it drops that much, then that hurts the town's tax base ultimately. I mean, at least.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I don't know those numbers. That's interesting. Yeah, that's.
And that's part of what we're looking at is, hey, well, you know, if these, you know, don't stay as a higher performing asset class, then what are we looking at? And I was wondering if you had any insight there. Thank you for your input there. Anything else that you might chat with us about that would be of interest to the community, about any other impacts or collateral positives or collateral damage that might come?
Yeah. So I keep hearing about, and not in Newington, but in general, you know, we deal with these residential in a commercial zone, or instead of an office building, you know, kids. And, you know, all the studies I've seen, the kids just aren't there. I mean, just, you know, anecdotally, I live in Rye, been living in Rye for, I don't know, almost 30 years now. And, you know, the school population is about half of what it was when my kids went to school here. You know, I had 3 kids go through the school system here. And if you look, you know, throughout the state, so I'm starting on behalf of some developers compiling some of these housing studies, and, you know, that just shows that in general, you know, these apartment buildings are not generating, you know, a large amount of kids. And I got a couple of developers that have really large portfolios of apartment buildings, and they're putting together their own housing studies just to show, you know, some of these towns, because the towns are getting very nervous that all of a sudden, you know, there's going to be this influx of kids and overwhelm the school system. And that has not been the case, quite frankly.
That's good to know. I mean, it's funny, the selectmen and the planning board, interestingly enough, about a year ago or so, I don't know exact time frame. I know it was kind of wrapped up and rolled out to the community. I want to say it was last May or June, but we had a study done on mixed use, and that's exactly what I believe the gentleman's name was, Mark Fougere, and there was another person involved. One guy was from, I want to say, a planning kind of company that does that type of planning work, and then somebody else, I want to say from UNH.
It was Clay Mitchell.
Thank you, Jerry. I
Mitchell.
thought you might know those names, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So my understanding is New Hampshire Housing Finance has done a lot of studies on school-age children per unit or per development, and it's really a function of number of bedrooms. If you have
Right.
one bedroom, you're going to get 0.10,
Right.
like one school-age kid for every 10 units. And if you have 2, you might get a little bit more. But a family with 2 or 3 kids probably does not want to live in a mixed-use development that's going to have commercial retail. They would rather have a plot of land in some suburban community, I guess, with some acreage. And there's lots of studies done by New Hampshire Housing Finance, primarily Russ Tebow, on this subject. So.
That's good input, and that's exactly what the study that the planning board paid for and got behind has
Right.
determined. It actually says that exact thing. To Jerry's point, some of those numbers I think Jerry might be pulling right off of that report, but
Right.
at any rate.
Yeah, and that's what, like I said, we have guys that own substantial portfolios, and they've done their own studies, you know what I mean, of just their own pop demographics. And what's amazing is, to Jerry's point, you know, everybody wants a studio and 1 bedroom. People want to live by themselves now, but they want the community space down on the first floor. They want the active space down there, the dog walking and all that, but they're happy, you know, living by themselves in a, you know, 1 bedroom and the other thing that's surprising, and I'm hearing it more and more from these guys, at least in the Seacoast area, a lot of these apartments are people over 55 that are downsizing, that may have multiple residents across the country, and all of a sudden they'll come to Portsmouth for, a week. They'll go to San Francisco for a week. They'll go to Texas. That's a really interesting dynamic. And if you talk to some of these housing developers, they'll tell you the toughest apartments they keep, the 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms those are the toughest ones to rent. That the studios and the 1 bedrooms are going fast, and a lot of them are just absentee tenants too.
That's better for everybody.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Jerry or Bob, do you guys have any other comments or things to add in? Bob,
Yeah, a comment or a question for Greg. A couple months ago, 6 months ago, the Economic Development Committee had a conference with UB Properties, Newington Place, and we had a nice chat and everything like that. But I think they want to sell their properties right now and maybe not do redevelopment. Is that your understanding, Greg?
Yeah, the UB property is on the market. Actually, Christian's representing them. Christian's got that thing on the market now.
So they just want to sell it and be done with it, I guess, right?
Yeah, Jerry, I've been kind of removed from that, but I actually saw the sales flyer, and I called Christian and Kent White, and I'm like, "This is for sale?" They're like, "Yeah." So I didn't realize it had gotten to that point with my last discussion with Linda Lacey and them was that they were just looking to the future, So I don't know what they concluded that future was going to look like, but it is on the market. I'm not telling any secrets. That's a public document. Yeah.
And I was on mute. I'm sorry. I was talking to myself. Couple questions. When on the regulations for workforce housing, you must be some number of housing units that must be 2 or 3 bedrooms to accommodate the workforce. Is that correct? You couldn't put all 1 bedrooms in and have it called workforce housing, could you?
Well, Bob, we're not even trying to mandate that this is workforce housing. This would be market housing is what I'm seeing it as, not so much that we're trying to call this workforce housing. But I mean, and it's not weird. I'm just putting it out there that and Greg, maybe obviously you're going to know.
Yeah, well, Portsmouth does have an ordinance. If you guys wanted to read it, I mean, it's I was involved. It's the West End Yards project that's under construction now, where the old Frank Jones Center is behind the U-Haul. There's 250 apartments going in there, and then that's going to be a mixed use with an office retail building out front. But there is if you look in the Portsmouth ordinance, they give you density bonuses if you include a percentage of workforce housing. So I think in that one we have like 25 workforce housing units out of the 250.
Okay, that answers that. Second point is, right now you're looking at the dynamics where fewer and fewer kids, but as you well know, these demographic changes occur. So the question is, I think you have to look out more than just the next 4 or 5 years. You need to look out a little further because these dynamics change again. And I think it's important to keep that in mind when you're doing this kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm not a demographer, but you also look at the common sense. The barrier of entry to get into Newington, to get into Rye, to get it, some of these towns, it's a tough barrier to entry. I don't care if you don't even have kids, and never mind a family. So I worry sometimes. I'm chairman of the Rye Rec. I've been chairman for 20 years. And our recreation programming, we have more people in the Hunt over 55 programming than we do in the, elementary school. I've watched that evolve over 20 years, and that's a really strange dynamic. And it's tough for young families to, move into this town.
Yeah. One last question. When a developer comes into an area to develop something, how far out do they look in terms of, getting what they need out of this? How far out do they go? 5 years, they go about 10 years. What's their time frame?
Everybody's a little bit different, and some guys come in and look for the opportunity to, if they can get the right numbers to work, they're just gonna permit it and flip it. Some guys are gonna build it and flip it. Some guys are in it for the long haul. So I don't have a good answer. I've been
Mhm.
involved with all three of those. I'm, right now we're selling projects that haven't broken ground yet, just have approvals in place. And I got other guys that are saying, no, you know what, we're holding on this for 20, 30 years that, so they're going the extra mile. They're putting that extra money into the project because they
Mhm.
want it to last while they own it.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Greg, thank you for coming on with us. If nobody else has any other questions, I'll go ahead and call for the meeting to be adjourned here. And thank you for helping us round out our informational session on mixed use and how it might be possibly implemented in the best way and most reasonable way. If you come up with any other ideas or a topic that you want to present in the future, please just let me know. And,
Okay.
Jerry, anything else, or Bob?
No, I'm set.
All set.
Okay, well, Greg,
right.
thank you.
Have a good
again
Thank you.
for
Thank
your
you,
help.
Greg.
Yep. Good to see you guys. Yep. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.